Just give me a nice level.
Testicles 1, 2. Testicles 1, 2.
Well, that's a reassuring number.
Yeah,
Two.
that's enough. That's enough.
That's all you need, really. Now I'm going to be reading. Just say again, Paul. Just speak at your own comfortable level.
Well, I have a very low voice, but it's if I speak close enough, it should all resonate and come through.
You're fine. You're absolutely fine. That's cool. As I keep getting told, we can always boost it. So don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry about anything.
No. I don't worry about things anymore.
Well, listen, I was going to ask you just to start off with, Paul Cox, how are you? How are you feeling?
Well, it's extraordinary that I'm still alive. That's all I can say. And I should not be here. And for some reason, I'm still here. So it's quite funny, actually. I used to worry about it. Now I don't anymore.
You've got your film Force of Destiny, your latest film. Are you thinking of your next film already?
Yes, I just finished it. No, not shooting, but writing it. Yeah.
Right. So you're still very much in the creative process.
Well,
Nothing stopped that.
No, because then you'll finish up as a little Munch painting lying in the bed with our teeth and, going into the dark. No. I will go in full blast. Thank you very much.
Now, I've seen your film Force of Destiny, and well, what can we say, Paul Cox? It's another Paul Cox film, another shameless exercise in populism, in appealing to the lowest common denominator, just to make some quick money at the multiplex.
Exactly.
For shame, Paul Cox. When are you going to learn?
I know, I've totally sold out. Yes, well, what option did I have? I was living in the gutter, so I had to do something.
Paul, tell us about... Just firstly, tell us what the film is about.
Force of Destiny?
Yes.
Well, it's about a modern phenomenon. I mean, it's only in the last 25 years that we can actually take and lift an organ out of a dead person and pop it into and keep another person alive. And, this very strange thing happened to me, and it took me a long time to adjust to the fact that I actually live by the grace of somebody else. I had cancer, and there's only very few people with cancer of the liver that actually, firstly, survive, and secondly, get a liver transplant, because usually the cancer is such a demon. It lurks in the dark and then pops up at any time, which happens to me again, so I'm still, but I got an extra 5 years out of this gift of life, and I hope I used it properly. One of the reasons that I certainly made this film, because I want people to be more aware of leaving their organs behind before taking them with them in their dark graves,
It's not often that we get a Paul Cox film with an overt message in it. But this one does have an overt message, doesn't it?
Mm.
What is the message?
Leave your organs behind before you snuff it, or at least sign a form, and don't, go into eternity. Think that one day you'll go back to the village square, and then when your heart is missing or your liver, God will not accept you into heaven or hell. And the message is, for heaven's sake, be a donor.
Did you know much about organ donation rates in Australia before your experience?
Not really. I mean, they're much more serious than we all know,
So how did you react when you found out that Australia is it among the lowest, or is it the lowest organ donation
It's
rate in the
amongst
world?
the lowest, and it is totally insane, partly because of religious fanaticism and all that sort of stuff. But I think a lot of people could be, people that I've known well, beautiful people, because usually when something dramatic happens to somebody, it sort of improves their spirit. People become more humane when they stand and dance on the edge of the void. They realize that all they have is their lives, their humanity. And so these people are very wonderful, warm, marvelous friends. And quite a few of them that I've known and lived with and been to all sort of things with have died because there was no... I have been extraordinarily lucky at my age to still get a new liver whilst I had cancer is almost unheard of, you know.
And you have a rare blood type too, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
Well, Paul, has this made you realise that there might be someone looking down upon you? I know you're not a religious person, but has it made you rethink?
How do you know that? No, yes, I'm not. I don't believe in any particular religion, but it has made me extremely spiritual, of course.
Meaning that you believe in a creator? I'm getting a little off the point. We'll come back to the film in a second.
No. It's important to talk about the creator because, you know, I don't believe in the God of man. I find it extraordinary when they spent 9 years flying to Pluto and finally we get a few shots back. 9 years of traveling is spectacular, and then it takes weeks or months before we get pictures back. It's unbelievable. And just if you give that a solid thought, then you will never do anything nasty to another human being. It is too spectacular that we are living in an age where we can actually explore these things. I always said in the past when men went to the moon, I didn't want them to go to the moon because the whole dream of the man on the moon when I was a child, we had, if there was sand in our eyes, that was the man in the moon and had thrown some sand in our eyes when we woke up. But I liked the idea that there was some mystery about it, and now they've left a bag of human shit on the moon, and it just ruined my whole idea of this. It's ridiculous. Leave the moon alone and but respect it, and this amazing, wonderful ball of life that is hanging in the sky every night is an extraordinary thing.
Paul, how do you want people to react to Force of Destiny?
To react, yeah. I think, whatever, it's our modern cinema to me is, if I may use the word, fucked. And most films, I don't go to many films anymore. I think reading is a far more enjoyable experience than going to the movies. But of course I love film. When I was very sick, I did some work for a university in the States, and they installed a little home theater in my home, which I couldn't afford myself, so they did it for me, and I had to just assess a few students. In the process, I wanted, of course, to watch a lot of films because I had time, and I was lying back in my bed, more or less. And I couldn't find any films I really wanted to see, because as soon as I got into modern films, there were very few films that actually interested me. Then I went back through all the classics when people really had a lot of trouble making films, and it was far more difficult. And we have all the means now to make spectacular films for very little money. We can do it all. I had to go through all the classics, and there are some fantastic, beautiful things being done until we suddenly... until film became a commodity, a type of thing you sell. Everything has to have a commercial ring around it. I find that quite extraordinary.
Well, how do you want people to react to your latest film?
If it awakens some compassion for somebody else, of course I want them to react with love. Dig up a bit of love that is living in everybody's heart, which they have more or less locked up because our world doesn't talk about it. You don't sort of write a letter and somebody says, with love, Jim, you say, kind regards, sincerely. If you put love there, everybody thinks, ooh, well, that's a bit tricky. Why would people say this? I want them to react with their instinct and love, because I think this is a film that was made against all the odds. Should it be made? I shouldn't have been alive. I had to do this because out of gratitude. amazing gratitude. And also I became terribly emotional about being alive. And when I saw a bit of kindness anywhere, I wanted to give form and shape to the kindness we are capable of. So it's a very kind film, I see, and it's about love, and it is about survival, and it is about beauty, and it is about our capacity to give instead of to take.
You also have a central character who is a quiet hero. He perseveres. He is determined, but doesn't make a big deal of it. He's quite modest. This is a consistent theme in many of your films. Why do you like that quality so much?
Well, I don't believe in heroes. I've never believed in heroes. Everybody that always thinks and feels and struggles and is properly part of the human race is a hero, you know. So these are ordinary people struggling and living ordinary lives. But I do believe that there is an element of that we always have to search for an element of beauty. Like, I think the arts should be much more part of our daily lives. It is incredible that, a few years ago we tried to find out who the hell is the Minister for the Arts. And it happened to be the Attorney General, whose qualification to be the Minister for the Arts is that he loves going to the opera. No, isn't it lunacy? That everything that is actually designed to make our world is actually made by artists. And the only thing that remains from every civilization we've gone throughout the centuries was done by creative people. That has remained on this earth, together with the history of that civilization. Everything else crumbled. So old politicians went into their early or too late graves, and I think every civilization should have had a few artists as part of the actual. You look at the people we have running this country. Why isn't there a few artists involved that actually are responsible for the shape and form and design of our so-called civilization? I find that extraordinary. And the Minister for the Arts should be. You remember in Queensland they had. What was his name? Not Darren Hinch, but Hinch or Heinz or something.
Yeah,
Who was Minister for Racing and the Police and the Arts. And I don't think he'd ever been to a gallery. It's extraordinary stuff. And these are actually the people that the civilizations depends on these people. And this is what lingers throughout the years. And not speeches of our great leaders.
Your films are a very rare type of film in that you could look at the film without knowing who made it. And I reckon most people could guess a Paul Cox film when they see it, because the style across your filmography, more often than not, is consistent. You can tell a Paul Cox film. And I think that Force of Destiny is a testament to the fact that you, as a filmmaker, have kind of created your own filmmaking universe. You work on low budgets and you basically get the people you want in the film and you get to make it the way that you want. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, it's true. It's because I'm very stubborn.
I was going to say creative and innovative and determined, but if you want to go with stubborn, that's fine.
It's probably because,
Tell me a bit about that, about the world that you create, the filmmaking world that you create in which you make your films.
I think film is the most extraordinary gift to all of us. It's a fantastic thing to, you can combine all the other arts in one wonderful medium. And film usually has much more to do with music and painting than with literature or with the theater. I think it's really very much detached. As soon as people make a film of a book, you can see it straight away. It doesn't really gel. And so my films are they come from a little glimpse of illumination, I call it. And that capture you off guard, and suddenly something haunts you. I think, my God, this needs to be investigated. And then you have the enormous fight to get people. You know, when I made films like Innocence or A Woman's Tale, films that were hugely successful all over the world, that had no impact here. Usually only in Melbourne they got very bad crits, but everybody else liked them. They were very commercially very successful. If you try to make a film like that now, and you say, I want to make a film about two elderly people falling in love, you know, go to hell. You know, where is the action and all this? It is very extremely hard, and therefore you have to be very dedicated. I've been very lucky finding the right people to help me to do this, but it wasn't easy.
Is it a combination of always working on very low budgets and having a circle of friends who are also artists, who are happy to contribute their time and effort into your films?
It's something like that, but sometimes the budgets are not. I think $1 million or $2 million is a lot of money. And I think the responsibility to actually live out your dreams is an extraordinarily big responsibility. I would say when people say low budgets, I think they are called responsible budgets. I might pick my pockets. Do you want to see my pockets? They're quite empty, and I have not filled my life and my cupboards with all sorts of goodies. I have lived for what I did, and I have loved what I did, and I've also bled for what I did. It wasn't easy.
Now, broadly speaking, I think your films can be divided. This is very, very coarse, and I am generalizing, but can be divided into two types of films. One is a film that is really esoteric, like the Braid, the Golden Braid, very esoteric film, Paul Cox. But most of your films are about love, innocence, Lonely Hearts, which is probably one of the most beautiful Australian films ever made. I mean, do you accept that there seems to be two types of films that you make? Exile is another one, a very esoteric film, that you tend to go either for esoteria or something that really is emotionally quite raw and quite moving and quite touching.
I always feel that I'm not in charge of that. It just happens. You know, I don't set out to think, oh, and I'm going to do this. There is never any exploitation. It happens. It's I believe in my instinct much more so and trust it than my so-called intellect. And I just follow whatever I dream about or whatever forces me to go through an awful lot of shit to do it.
Well, look, I would love to spend another 2 hours talking to you. Unfortunately, I can't. So I'm just going to just make this general points. Your best films are really beautiful films. Lonely Hearts, My First Wife, Innocence. These films are really about love and about devotion and about commitment and about the dynamics of relationships. Are you pulling all of this out of yourself from your observations? Where does that Ingmar Bergman type authenticity, emotional authenticity come from?
I've no idea. I'm compelled to do things. I think certainly it has never been a sort of career move or following the right direction. It's just happened. I believe life is much more a matter of fate than choice. I didn't have a choice. It just happened. You know, I made a film on Vincent van Gogh 35 years ago or something. It's the most popular film. Everybody walked out when we screened it the first time. I almost went to jail because I'd lied about having distribution and stuff. And 35 years later, that film is, you know, if I hadn't made that film that everybody ignored, I would be living in the gutter. Can
I just ask you specifically about two of your films? Molokai. What ended up happening with that film? Because it is a beautiful film. I think it is a film about a hero, despite what you say about not, believing in heroes. It is a heroic film.
He becomes a hero because he becomes a bigger human being. You see, that's what makes a hero.
And what happened with the legal wrangling over that film? Did you end up getting the rights back for that film?
No, I just pretend I have the rights because they still owe me a lot of money. These people were amazing, amazing. And, it's now 10, 15 years ago. But that also made me determined never to be produced by anybody again, because they did ruin that film. The first screening of that was bigger than Gandhi. There were people there that said, this is a fantastic film. And I had a very good friend in Holland who's been murdered, Theo van Gogh. He sat next to me. With Paul Garofsky, we sat there. In the middle of the screening, we suddenly all did the thumbs up from Roger Ebert and said, this is great. Nothing to do with me. I was part of this, part of a great circus. And straight after that, they destroyed it. Now, it happened to his own life, to Damien's life as well. Exactly what happened in it. I've had the same thing with Vincent van Gogh. Somehow the film and the making of it copies whatever happened in their lives. And Damien is a very perfect example. It was a spectacular film. So they ruined it. Then I made Innocence, and then they kept calling me, please come back and put the film back the way it was. And of course they had already cut the negative at the time, and they had done everything to sabotage me. Never do that again. And of course, that was a circus. I started to write the book, The Making, the Remaking, the Making, the Unmaking, and the Remaking of Father Damien. When I got 40 pages in, I got very sick, and I was suddenly told I had cancer of the liver and I was dying, because that film cost me a lot. And the frustration and the madness, the selfishness and the blindness of the people behind it that had a lot of money for black, dirty money. All money is dirty anyway, but this was a big budget. It was a spectacular film, bigger than Gandhi. And when we saw it the first time, I thought, this is it. This is a wonderful film. They ruined it. And later on, I spent months trying to somehow do the film, but it never had the same spark.
My First Wife is proof that the more purely psychological you get with a film, the more enthrallingly dramatic it is. It is an almost purely psychological film and compelling. It remains one of my top 5 Australian films, and it saw it in 1983. It is probably your Ingmar Bergman movie. It is just such a great raw nerve drama. You drew that from your own life, Paul?
Most of it has in most of those films, of course, your own life. That's the closest you can get to experiences. I mean, there is, you can observe things, but yes, of course, but it has nothing to do with actually what happens to me when my marriage broke up. But the actual emotions are very raw, and they're very close to what happened.
It's just a swirl of anger and lust and jealousy and regret and loss and compromise. There's no other film about relationships.
But I had two fantastic actors, you see. John Hargreaves was great, and Wendy, my dear friend Wendy, was wonderful,
You also were friends with Sheila Lawrence, and also, of course, with Norman Kaye, who starred in a lot of your films. You are responsible for their career best performances on film.
Yeah, that is
You're
true.
also close friends with all of them, and regrettably, they've all passed away. Can you tell me about the nature of your friendships with these people?
Well, with Norman, for instance, at that point, I was quite inexperienced. I knew how to do all these things, but emotionally I wasn't complete. And Norman, I also had a suspicion about the actors. They took too much time, and they took too much of my time. And so I was interested in getting on with the movie, and then didn't pay enough attention to the actors. Then I met Norman, and I suddenly started to realize the actors give form and shape to dreams and things you want to say. And I changed the whole concept. But before that, I wasn't interested enough in the actors. Suddenly I realized, because Norman also was an incredible ham. He he was the great hero of the village theatre in St. Martin's and all those places. But we both suddenly hit it. We both suddenly grew up. And it happened by accident, more or less, by talking and understanding and loving one another. I loved Norman very much. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful, wonderful, great hero.
And Wendy Hargraves.
Wendy,
Sorry, Wendy, I will edit this out. Wendy.
no, leave it in. It's good.
Wendy Hughes. Again, a remarkable actress. I think she's sometimes underrated for how good an actress she can be. You really pulled a great performance out of her. Again, Paul Cox, very raw emotions in that film, coursing through her, coursing through John Hargraves. Is this the result of capturing something the first time you shoot it? Is it a matter of honing the performances over many takes or through intensive rehearsal? How did you get these pitch-perfect performances out of these actors?
You know what it is? Trust. Total trust, because I hardly rehearse. I don't even want them to know the lines too well. We only do 1 or 2 takes. There's never a long rehearsal period. I very carefully position everything before I actually shoot. We then are totally isolated. I'd send everybody away. There's just the actors and myself. And then it is trust. And then before that, it's friendship, because you have to trust your friends. Wendy and I became very, very good friends. I loved her dearly. She was a great woman, a great fire. She had enormous talent. She could only feed that into some sort of commercial direction. And then when we did something, she blossomed and she went for it. And I didn't have to do anything. Wendy was a spectacular creative force. And that she had to die at such a young age was just a great tragedy.
And what about working with John Hargraves? That incredible sense you get in that film of him trying to contain his rage and having to give vent to it on occasion, but then having to try to control it in the hopes of getting his wife back.
Yeah, well, that is, we're all a bit mad, and especially when it comes to undermining something you believe in. I thought I was very hurt when my marriage broke up, because I waited for a long time to get married, and it's whatever people think of me, they think I live a very crazy and mad life. I'm quite conservative in the end. And for me to lose my marriage, and I had a child, that was a devastating blow. And that blow rubbed off on the film, And John understood this very well. And although John was gay, and, it has nothing to do with it. He's a human being, and he could just perform like a wonderful monster, because he went mad out of pain, because he loved her, and he wanted, I made him Russian because there's some sort of old-fashioned dedication to the rules and regulations of life,
Was he meant to smash that door?
Oh, yes. Well,
because it looks real.
The actual hand that went through it was mine.
Okay.
Because they thought they had an ambulance standing by that would cut myself. We're not going to have a normal glass in there and everything. We just do it the way it is.
Now, unfortunately, Sheila Florence is still best known for her role in Prisoner. Her best performance is in your film.
Yeah, I think that's a spectacular. That film made millions, and it's still running in Japan, for instance, in all the small places. It had an incredible run in Tokyo. That performance is so real.
This is A Woman's Tale we're talking about. Yeah.
It is a wonderful performance. Sheila and I were very good friends. We were drinking buddies, Sheila loved to drink. And we wrote a script when I heard she was ill. We wrote a script in about... I got Barry Dickens involved, but Sheila didn't get on very well with him because there was no time for jokes. But we were at that script in 3 days' time, and then off we went because he was given 6-7 weeks to live. But of course, this gave her an incentive to stay alive, and she was there until she got the big award.
Now, Paul Cox, why is it so hard to get your films on DVD? I know that you can get them through the National Sound and Film Archive it's about $36 a pop. Why aren't they commercially available? Why are they so hard to get? It's not fair to you because it seems to be consigning your body of work to the status of being a relic, of being an art relic. And that's not true.
No, not
your
at all.
films live and they breathe. The better ones live and breathe as great films. Cactus, for instance, is one of the best films I've ever seen about going blind, about the condition of blindness. Try and find that film. Why are your films so hard to get, mate?
You can get them now through a place called Arts Film. They have, but they're very expensive, and they can,
Yeah.
But because there is no distributor that can see much profit in doing this, and it has been like that all the way along.
With these DVDs that you can get through Art Film and through the National Film and Sound Archive, have you put commentaries on them at all? Have you done that thing where the filmmaker talks?
Some of them have.
Okay.
Innocence, for instance, has a whole thing. A few of them have, but I've never really taken that. I always believe if something has a purpose and something to say, the world has a conscience. Don't try to bribe it. And that's what people do all the time. I have not tried to bribe anything. The strange thing is, of course, that all these films are still alive. And I'm quite, I'm a bit arrogant about this by saying, I told you so, because nobody believed in them. I can't, I won't go into details, but if you knew the history of every one of these films and the ignorance and the fights I had to actually make these films, and then to find a distributor, and then they took all the money, and then you had to sell out. Only 25 years after Vincent, I finally owned the film. It's kept me alive because I was totally broke, It amazing, 25 years later, and now it's one of the most popular films ever made. And it is an absolute classic. Now, if you know the history of this, you cannot believe. If you look, for instance, at the whole history of the arts, so to speak, if you go to Vivaldi, it took 200 years after Vivaldi that somebody used some of his music in a commercial, for heaven's sake. It was the Four Seasons. And suddenly, after 200 years after he died, Vivaldi became the great composer he is today. Bach took 100 years, etc., etc. These films, all of them, took a long time before. There's firstly Force of Destiny, when people thought, oh no, that's not going to work. How can you? I had no fear. I had nothing to lose. Nobody thought that I would be alive by the time the film had been shot. I was very much alive. I believed in the film all the time. And I flashed back I made it like a symphony, because with music you can one moment stand on the mountaintop and you can suddenly be in the darkest valley. And that's how we shot the film, without any fear. 8 times it flashes from Melbourne, Australia, to India and back again. When suddenly after a lecture at the university, they walked through an Indian park. People said, hey, where did you get all the Indian extras from? They thought I had got a lot of Indian extras in the St. Gardens. It's just insane. We actually went straight away to India and shot it there. And so I'd done this quite a few times, and I would never have done that if I hadn't been on the edge of the void, because I was dying. I'd been told I wouldn't live very long. So I'm still here. And that's why I would love to make another film, because all that fear that you think, oh my God, this is not going to work. I didn't have that at all. Force of Destiny is a very unpretentious film. I think it has, but it is also it penetrates the bones very slowly and carefully, and it takes a while for people to actually digest it. But it's with everything that has an ability to reawaken your humanity. That takes a little while. It penetrates your bones, and That's what Force of Destiny actually does. I found it now quite a few times. I had a screening in India where they're much more in tune with all this, and it was spectacular. You know, I spent people hanging off the ceiling. It was an incredible screening. Then I knew this is right. Thank you all very much. You know, I didn't make that film to make any money. It was done out of gratitude because of all the people that helped me to actually stay alive, and all my friends that believed. And there it was, and suddenly I saw people really reacting and crying and being in touch with their own humanity, and it was an incredible liberation for me and an enormous payment. That's all I needed. And I hope this happens too. You know, it's wonderful that the Melbourne Film Festival actually puts the film on as an opening because it gets a lot of attention. And we shall be there and face all the hypocrisy and face all the truth and everything. So it'll be an interesting evening. Because the next film is very different from everything I've done.
Yeah?
It is about my inert disgust. It's about there was one little message on a television set where in Syria they shot fleeing children in the back. They killed our children in the back. And the mother grabbed her dead child and begged the people to please shoot her. She wanted to die. I have never been so upset about belonging to the human race. How disgusting. The whole world should have stopped. Stop here. Do not go on. You know, straight after that, I saw a man in the street in Greece, a very fine old man who made little paper planes to sell to tourists. And the CNN reporter said, "How's business?" And the man looked at this guy and looked at the camera and said, "Business? What is business?" And it sums up the whole thing. That's our big goal, make money, business and everything. There is something else going on. We are capable of much more. If that is the limitation we've put upon ourselves to actually make money, forget it. There's no hope for any of us, you know.